What's good? It's your boy Fanon. Going to talk about something that Danny Jacobs had to say about Gennady Golovkin and make some general observations about Gennady Golovkin, Golden Boy Promotion, Showtime, HBO, and this whole debacle that has taken place since Canelo Alvarez, since the beginning of the first press conference that took place that I can recall to having taken place with Gennady Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez 2. And even back to the original fight, But we'll start with the recent one. And before I do that, I'm definitely going to be doing a live stream on this subject and also some stuff Adrian Bronner has come out with. There's a young boxer that a subscriber asked me to look up and look into, named Teofimo Lopez, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Very, very exciting fighter that is supposed to, it is rumored, well, it was said by the father in an interview that he actually made Devin Haney not come out for a 6th round of a sparring match. I don't know what that means really, but this kid really does look excellent. So I definitely want to cover him and some other upcoming boxers in the next live stream that we do. And so that in the heavyweight division, there's a lot of things going on in boxing right now. With the 147-pound division, the heavyweight division, the 160-pound division, even what's going on with the lightweight division. It's just a lot popping off in boxing. I wish more of the things that were popping off were related to actual fights that were happening, but nonetheless, as a boxing geek, a boxing addict, just gotta take what you can give, and sometimes you gotta take what you get, and sometimes it's just the exciting and controversial, sometimes funny news that take place around the sport of boxing. So with that said, we're going to talk about this and a lot of other things in the live stream. So I hope that you accept my invitation to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you can be notified of when these discussions take place. Now, on to what Danny Jacobs said, which is real funny to me. GGG lining up scrubs. And Derevyanchenko, who's the IBF mandatory challenger for him, is a tough fight. Danny Jacobs might be the only boxer in the world with inside knowledge of Gennady Golovkin and Sergey Derevyanchenko. Jacobs gave Golovkin perhaps the most difficult fight of his career on March 2017 in Madison Square Garden. Derevyanchenko, who's trained and managed by the same men as Jacobs, was one of Jacobs' primary sparring partners for the Golovkin fight. The numerous rounds they've sparred against each other have convinced Jacobs that Golovkin versus Derevyanchenko would be a fight either unbeaten heavyweight could win. That would be a really good fight for both fighters, Jacobs said during open workout Thursday at Gleason's gym in Brooklyn. I know that Sergey has that grit. He has skill beyond belief. He is a really talented guy. I don't know who would win that fight, even though I have been in there with both guys. May the best man win if it were to happen. Ukraine's Derevyanchenko, who's 12-0 with 10 KOs, is the mandatory challenger for Golovkin's IBF 160-pound championship. Lou DiBella, Derevyanchenko's promoter, is pushing for Golovkin, 37-0 with 1 draw, 33 KOs, to make his mandatory defense against Derevyanchenko on May 5th. Otherwise, DiBella believes the IBF should strip Golovkin. Tom Loeffler, Golovkin's promoter, has sought other potential replacements for the temporarily suspended Canelo Alvarez. Most recently, inactive junior middleweight contender Vanis Martirosyan. Loeffler said Thursday that there's not enough money available through HBO's license fee to televise Golovkin's fight May 5th to properly compensate Golovkin and Derevyanchenko for what would be a difficult fight on short notice. I think Golovkin is trying to go down the line of scrubs. It's just about what sells right now, Jacobs said. I think Triple G, being that he was promoted as a devastating monster, I think the tides are kind of flipping now. I don't think anyone is running from him. I think everyone's gunning after him now. And that kind of helps you, and that kind of tells you the the way boxing is, the way boxing works. If Sergey was about to get that opportunity, I'd be more than happy for him. Brooklyn's Jacobs fully understands the business of boxing, in this case, the high-risk, low-reward nature of fighting Derevyanchenko for Golovkin. He also acknowledged that not fighting Derevyanchenko opens up Golovkin to warrant criticism. I guess it makes business sense because Sergey's probably not the biggest name in the world, Jacobs said. But I mean, if we're talking about true love for the sport and we're talking about two champions, we're talking about all they made this guy up to be. He has to come and has to execute that. The 31-year-old Jacobs, who narrowly lost a 12-round unanimous decision to Golovkin, hopes to get a rematch with the Kazakh knockouts artist as soon as possible. Jacobs is currently preparing for his 12-round middleweight fight against Poland's Selecki on April 28th in Barclays Center on HBO. Now, here's the thing for me on this. There's no excuse for Gennady Golovkin not fighting Derevyanchenko if Derevyanchenko is his mandatory, because there's not enough money. HBO doesn't have enough money to properly compensate him. If that's the case, and you guys can't come to an agreement, the IBF needs to order that mandatory. If they can't come up with an agreement, either Gennady Golovkin needs to drop the belt, or somebody other than then the IBF needs to issue a purse bid, and somebody other than Tom Loeffler, as the promoter of Gennady Golovkin, can bid on that fight. It's that simple. If they don't have the money to make the fight and they don't think that there's enough money into it, drop the belt. What's the issue? What is the issue? Just go on ahead and drop the belt. Now, what this guy's been trying to do, clearly, being Gennady Golovkin, is he's been looking to fight guys that he can't lose to. It can't lose to. He's trying to fight a guy. First, I can't remember the name of the guy from Mexico who had never fought outside of Tijuana before. Right? Well, excuse me. He had fought a few times out of Tijuana. Right? And I think the other times it was in Montego that he fought in, but he never fought outside of Mexico. He's a young guy who started his career at welterweight and had moved up to 154. So he's not even a natural 160 pounder. A guy that was so overmatched that Nacho Beristain said, the great trainer out of Mexico, former trainer for Juan Manuel Marquez, said, that he agreed with them the Nevada State Athletic Commission not allowing that fight to take place, because he'd hate to have seen a young guy like that, a young talented fighter like that, get ruined or get get diminished by stepping up and fighting a level that he was clearly not ready for. And then you have Gennady Golovkin then trying to fight Vanis Martirosyan. And I do believe Vanis Martirosyan also gets turned down by Nevada State Athletic Commission. Vanis Martirosyan is a 154 pounder. He lost to both Demetrius Andrade and Jermell Charlo at 154 pounds. And I don't think he's fought but one time in the last couple years. So how is that a reasonable fight? That's not a reasonable fight. And you actually have then you have somebody else that he turned down in Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade said he would step in. Demetrius Andrade is you can say a lot of things about whether or not he is, kind of made it difficult on himself by what had happened with the negotiations that took place between himself, Showtime, Jermell Charlo. There's no doubt that Demetrius Andrade is a world-class fighter. Southpaw, he can fight at 160 pounds, but he doesn't want him. He wants, and Spike O'Sullivan, he was even in negotiations with Spike O'Sullivan, who you've got to consider Spike O'Sullivan to be, Spike O'Sullivan looked decent in the last fight that he had against, I can't remember the name of the guy that he wound up stopping in that fight, but it was a guy that was coming off of who had been knocked out previously. But Spike O'Sullivan said that they were in negotiations, and then Loeffler and those guys cut his purse offer in half. So, which is it? I'm not sure what it is. It could be a combination of a bunch of things. HBO, and I'm happy to say, HBO seems like they're not willing to put a lot of money in boxing matches. That I don't have any doubt. During a lot of the conversations that I hear, and this usually comes in, or lately it's come in the conversations around Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder and, pay-per-view, right? And the fact that Deontay Wilder's never been on pay-per-view before. And the fact that we don't know what the pay-per-view numbers would be for Deontay Wilder, because they might be low like Gennady Golovkin's, where Gennady Golovkin does 150,000 pay-per-views or whatever. But the reason that HBO puts people on pay-per-view, because the United States pay-per-view is expensive. If you had $17 pay-per-views, $22 pay-per-views, more people might be willing to get on, those pay-per-view numbers would be better as far as the numbers of people that watched, because it'd be 1/3 of the price. But in the United States, most pay-per-views are $60, $70, $80. You get one of those Floyd Mayweather things, that crap could be up close to $90 for a pay-per-view. That's expensive here. But what HBO does is HBO is happy with 100,000 people putting it on tuning into a pay-per-view. They're happy with that. It looks bad for the boxer, but it doesn't hit them in the pocket because they cover their costs in the pay-per-view. So if they're not willing to put Gennady Golovkin in on pay-per-view, on HBO pay-per-view against Derevyanchenko, that tells you what they don't even, they doubt that they might be doubting that Gennady Golovkin can cover his costs on HBO pay-per-view. You know what I mean? Like, they might be doubting that the cat can do 75,000 pay-per-view buys, because Gennady Golovkin he's not a big star. He never has been a big star in the United States. What he was an HBO hype job is what he is. Not saying that the guy can't fight, but he's a hype job. He was sold as this guy that nobody wanted to fight. He was going to be this big Kazakhstan killer, right? And it just never panned out because people in the U.S. weren't interested in him. They weren't interested. They weren't just going to, you can't just tell people that somebody's great and just announce them as being popular in a country that they're not from, where they don't have any built-in fan base, and expect him to be a superstar. And just calling them a superstar doesn't make them a superstar. So I don't doubt that HBO's not willing to put any money in on this fight, unless he's fighting Canelo Alvarez. Right? If he's willing to fight Canelo, if Canelo Alvarez is in the mix, then hey, man, yeah, they got their big bad guy. They can, they can talk him up. They can do whatever. And then they can try to give him credit for, the pay-per-views that Canelo is responsible for. But, so maybe Tom Loeffler does have a point in, the HBO budget, their licensing fee, saying, they're not going to pay us for this fight. They're not going to pay for this fight. They're not interested in it. But that doesn't make a difference. Because then throw it to a purse bid, see if somebody else is interested in buying it, or strip Gennady Golovkin, and let that IBF go to the mandatory, have a title eliminator, and just get it out of the way, man. Just get it out of the way, and Gennady Golovkin can do whatever Gennady Golovkin wants to do from there. But to hold up just to hold it up, for the sake of HBO's budget, or Gennady Golovkin getting paid enough for the fight. Because the belts are supposed to signify who the best fighter is. It's not supposed to signify, how much you get paid. It's who the best fighter is. And the IBF champion should fight his mandatory. If he's not going, and it's not fair to Derevyanchenko, who might wind up getting pushed out 18 months. Right? If he doesn't get this one, and then Gennady Golovkin fights Canelo Alvarez in September, gets $8 million or whatever he gets in September, if that fight pops off in September, and then Gennady Golovkin decides, hey, that's enough, I'm done. And then you got to have a title eliminator, 4 or 5 months after that. And then after that, at that point in time, he becomes champion. That's a lot of wasted time for a guy that fought his way up, to be the mandatory. But it is what it is, man, as far as what, the IBF does and what Gennady Golovkin does. But I just find it very, very ironic that the guy that was sold as being somebody that everybody's afraid of is now the guy that is man, you can't even count the number of cats so you can make an argument that he's ducking. I mean, I can count them. As a matter of fact, let me count them. Demetrius Andrade, who said that he would be willing to step in, and I'm sure he'd be willing to step in there for a reasonable fee. You got Spike O'Sullivan, who's not even all that, who said that they undercut the price. Then you have Derevyanchenko, who he's not going to get in, who he's not getting his mandatory, he's not getting in the ring with. Then you've got Charlo, right? Charlo I know Charlo's fighting Centino, but hey, man, they might have tried to see if they could get the WBO to push that fight off and let Jamal Charlo get in the ring with them in May. He's already in training camp, but that might have been a harder thing to make. But, but instead of all these guys, he's now looking at this Japanese, this southpaw. I believe the kid is from Japan. Shout out to the Cali Enigma who who talked about that, man. Go check out his channel. Cali Enigma has that video up. But it's basically he's a young guy. You got to go to BoxRec to figure out who he is, and maybe you can find a couple rounds for him. But another guy that's clearly not done enough to deserve a shot at all of the major 3 of the 4 major championship belts. Because on the one side of it is when you pick a voluntary, you're giving that guy a title shot against all of the belts. So if you get upset, if Gennady Golovkin goes in there, right, and just has a bad night, gets old because he's already 36 years old, has a bad night, and then this Mexican kid, this kid from Mexico or Vanis Martirosyan, Vanis Martirosyan beats him by just some fluke, then Vanis Martirosyan has all of the belts, man. That is crazy. I don't think, and it's not like Gennady Golovkin hasn't fought. Gennady Golovkin's been an active fighter. So it's just not even, it's not fair to all the other middleweight fighters that out there that have put in the work to allow Gennady Golovkin to jump out here and cherry pick, because you got to call this an attempt to cherry pick. It's an attempt to cherry pick and stall so that he can get back in the ring with Canelo Alvarez, another 154-pounder, right? Because Canelo Alvarez really isn't even a middleweight. Canelo Alvarez is a 154-pounder that blew up, blew up in weight to get to 160 pounds. And, now there's questions about how he did that. So there's also the last part of it, which is I'm saying, man, it's not just, it's just more than ironic, is that, well, 2 things. One, that the pressure's back on Gennady Golovkin for some nonsense, because when this fight started, the pressure was on Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez, and Abel Sanchez for what Abel Sanchez has said about black fighters not being able to sell and not liking slick styles and guys that didn't want to just stand there and get hit, right? That, those exciting styles, that type of style isn't exciting for the fans. And, that's a, style. And he was hoping that, that Canelo Alvarez wouldn't fight like a black fighter, pretty much is what he said. And that blew up in his face. But then all that got swept under the rug after, and the attention shift onto another major issue, which was Canelo Alvarez popping dirty. But now that Canelo Alvarez popped dirty, we'll find out there's a hearing that's supposed to take place in 3 days on the 18th, but Canelo's already pulled out of the fight. We'll find out what the suspension is going to be from the Nevada State Athletic Commission, right? However long that's going to be. And so we'll see whether or not this fight can happen between Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez on, in September. But if it doesn't, oh man, it'd be so funny because Gennady Golovkin jumped on his soapbox, calling him a cheater, calling him this, calling him that, calling him this, calling him that. But then, despite all the words coming out of his mouth, he still wants to fight Canelo Alvarez, and he's willing and he's avoiding any type of tough competition, any type of potential upset that he could have faced in hopes of holding off long enough so where he can still get that payday off the guy that he called a cheater. And to be a fly on the wall of the Nevada State Athletic Commission and know whether or not it was the protestations of Gennady Golovkin that really pushed them to say, you know what, we've got to file a complaint against this guy because we can't have this fight now. Not with the guy that's the other guy getting into the other unarmed combatant getting into the ring complaining about it. So it is what it is, but hey man, it is obviously a scrub hunting season. And with that, I'm out.